Federal politician admits that Australians are slaves. Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. Hello, John.
Good afternoon, Martin. How are you going?
Well, I'm struggling. My shackles are rather heavy today.
Yes, we have some exclusive news to break on our show about a comment or a text message I got from a federal politician. In December, you and I did a show about Thomas Jefferson, and we did a show called Stop the Australian Arrest of Thomas Jefferson. And this was in the context of a parliamentary inquiry that was established in December by what's called the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. And this inquiry is looking at an inquiry into extremist movements and radicalisation in Australia. Now, under Australian law, all forms of violence against the government, any urging or discussion of violence against the government is completely illegal. And so I guess the proposition I put to you in December was that if Thomas Jefferson was alive in Australia today, his writings would be deemed to be extremist, and Jefferson himself would be deemed to be a far-right extremist. And I thought that that while I agree in general that violence against the government should be illegal, there are situations in history, and even in your history of the UK, whether it's the English Civil War or in, say, the 1381 rebellion in terms of what Parliament was doing with the poll tax, there are situations, or even in the Australian context of Ballarat in 1854, there are situations sometimes once every century or once every 150 years where the balance of power tips to such an extreme towards the authority or the government that the people need to rebel in one form or another in order to restore the balance of rights versus responsibilities. And that is, I guess, that is the context in which I put in my submission. So I think when we did our show in December, I said that the submissions were due on the 12th of February, which was last Friday, and I did put in my submission, and you had a bit of a read of my draft, and would you like to share your reactions to my to the monstrosity that I put forward?
Well, it was certainly wide-ranging, John, and quite thought-provoking. I guess there were two points that stood out for me. The first is that the sort of artificial polarization between left wing and right wing is really not the point, right? Essentially, there seems to me to be more correlation rather than diversity between those two extremes in terms of what they're saying and how they're saying it. So I think typifying it as left wing or right wing is a furphy. And the second point that you made, and it's the one I asked you at the time, was about how relevant Jefferson is now, because of course some would say, well, things have changed, that was then, this is now, and yet there is a universal truth here that at the end of the day, the people should expect our parliamentarians to act in a particular way, and part of that is the free speech, and of course, if they clamp down on free speech, then that's a problem.
The real problem is that with the statistics, both in terms of Australia as well as the OECD, trust has collapsed in political institutions and civic institutions, in courts, etc., in the media, and that collapse in trust is what's driving what I think is driving the extremism. So I basically asked the committee to look at this relationship between trust and how people talk on the internet, because I think there's a relationship there that's worth unpacking. And what I tried to do, and I did it in my own provocative way, was to document what I call a series of disturbing public policy trends, a series of public policy outcomes which clearly show Australia's in decline. If you want to reduce radicalisation and extremism, the Parliament needs to start doing the people's work, start to improve public policy outcomes, and what we need to do is to start rebuilding trust. I'm not sure that our current set of politicians are up to the job, because I think they're part of the problem.
Yeah, and John, I would say that I'm sure the committee will be a little bit surprised at the breadth and depth of your submission, right? Because it rather feels to me as though you have opened the aperture and are asking some really very fundamental questions which they probably didn't expect would be brought up in the context of this inquiry.
In terms of the title of the show, Federal Parliamentarian Admits Australians as Slaves. So what I did was, with my draft, I sent it to a range of people, and Martin, you were one of them, who looked at the draft, and I had a federal parliamentarian who read the draft. Now, we're going to put this, like, I got this text message, and I'm quoting verbatim about what I received from this parliamentarian. So let's put this on the screen. So this is the text message I received. Quote, can't advocate for violence, never going to pass muster. Jefferson lived in a different time. Rest of it was good, especially Cockburn comment. Your reasons for distrust were very valid. Now, couple of things. That they jump out at me. The first thing is that when I say that the trust has collapsed and there's a whole bunch of scandals which undermine confidence in our institutions. When a federal politician says to me that Jefferson lived in a different time, this brings up a very interesting theological and philosophical point in the sense that 200 years ago in England, as well as in the United States, they said we had rights from God, that we had rights that were worth fighting for, and we had the obligation, if not the duty, to defend those rights if things got out of control. And then in the 21st century, we're pretty much saying that, I don't know what this means. I don't know how you interpret this, Martin, but when someone says that Jefferson lived in a different time, what does that mean? Does that mean that our natural rights have now become extinct? Do we have rights anymore? Do we have the ability to defend those rights? Do we have the ability to fight back against Parliament? And what if we try to, go through all of the civil institutions that we have available to us, whether it's through the parliamentary process or the courts, or non-violent civil disobedience, etc. What if all of those mechanisms are unable to end the tyranny? Hopefully we get attention, and we try to get a definitive statement from Parliament as to, do we have rights? Are we free? Do we have the freedom to defend our rights, or are we slaves? At least one parliamentarian who, one would say is on the more conservative side, who you would expect to be on the more pro-freedom side, effectively said, well, no matter what Parliament does, you just have to accept what we're being told, and you just have to suck it up. So unfortunately, those who I thought would be, allies on this fight with us, to effectively say we're slaves, and it'll be up to the rest of the Parliament and the rest of the committee to make a statement as to, well, where do we sit in the 21st century?
Yeah, well, I am conscious of our channel name, In the Interest of the People, right? That was chosen quite carefully because we both felt that actually the interests of the people were being crushed. And this is another example. So it really is going to be an interesting test case. And in the interest of the people, John, we'll see what happens next.